In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
The ruling on the field stands.
We deliver jerseys, funny foam fingers, and everything you need for the game. But what you really get is so much more.
FedEx Delivery.
Game day spirit. What we deliver by delivering.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian Memphis Tigers podcast. This is the socially distanced edition of the Memphis Tigers podcast. This is your host, Drew Hill. As always, I am joined by Jonah Jordan, the Memphis Tigers football writer. Jonah, what are you doing to stay busy?
Writing a little bit here and there, playing a lot of video games, hanging out, reading your stuff over at the Daily Memphian, reading everybody's stuff over at the Daily Memphian. I'm not a big fan of this. I'm ready for it to be over, as I'm sure you are as well.
Yeah, this is it sucks. I mean, there's no other way around it, but the best thing we all can do is stay home and record these podcasts over the phone like we're doing today, and just sort of keep up with whatever we can and make sure we're all staying informed. And like you said, going over to the Daily Memphian and reading. But most importantly, keeping everybody at home safe and yourself safe by staying inside and not gathering in groups of people. But we do have some Memphis news to get to. The world of Memphis sports does not completely stop without even in the spread of a pandemic. We still have Tiger basketball recruiting to get to. You had a little bit of football news this week. Since football won't take as long, why don't we get that out of the way? Tell us what's going on, what happened with the pro day, and what's going on with Ryan Silverfield and recruiting.
So they canceled their pro day. They moved it from March 23rd to April 10th, but I really don't think anyone thought that ever was going to happen. It was so unrealistic. It was kind of a pipe dream from the get-go for them to have this happen, considering everything that's going on with social distancing, everything to do with travel, how difficult it is to travel right now. It was just never going to happen, and they finally had to cancel it. They pushed it back to the furthest date that they could, April 10th. That's the last possible day scouts could come to Memphis and do it, and they canceled it. So guys like Joey Magnifico, Dustin Woodard, Bryce Huff, Austin Hall, who were going to come in and kind of try and get that stock up a little bit, won't have a chance to. Unfortunate for them, really, but they are finding other ways around in this pre-draft process. Joey Magnifico ran drills a week or two ago where he did all the drills at the NFL Combine and was able to get that film and that out to scouts. But yeah, other than that, football's been kind of slow with spring practice being canceled, but they are finding a way to get out and recruit. Well, not get out, but they are finding a way to get their message out. They're using a lot of FaceTime, a lot of video, a lot of social media. Right now they're having to stagger who is in the building and who isn't. Some people are having to work 2 days a week. Other people are working the different 2 days a week. And it's been really difficult. They're doing Zoom calls to try and, stay together, keep going. Because, it is a new staff. These guys are still getting acquainted, but now they're having to do it over Zoom. So it is a completely different landscape for Ryan Silverfield right now, as I'm sure it is for Penny Hardaway.
Yeah, it's crazy, and we're just starting to heat up on some of the hot times of recruiting, especially for basketball. At this point, it doesn't look like you're going to get any AAU ball at all this summer. So when you take away that evaluation period, and right now it looks like they're just going to continue to push it back and hope that they can get some sort of evaluation period. It does make things harder on the coaches. That's something Penny said. He's like, it is a challenge, but at the same time, all the coaches are sort of aware that this is what they have to do, that they don't really get a choice, and that it's going to impact all of them equally. So it just is what it is. It's just something that you got to deal with. In terms of Memphis basketball and recruiting, like I said, this is really when it starts to heat up. Memphis got its first recruit to commit to them earlier this week, and and that was Ahmad Rand. And he committed on Wednesday night. It didn't come out until Thursday that he had committed, but it was a Wednesday night, late night sort of deal. He is a JUCO prospect. He was the 80th ranked junior college prospect according to JUCO recruiting. He is a 6'8", 6'9" shot blocker, really thin, but has really good timing, is really good at rebounding and blocking shots. And I know it's not really the type of recruit that a lot of Memphis fans will get super excited about, but I think when you listen to his story and you listen to his coaches talk, as well as, what you hear from the Memphis staff and how they feel about him, they're really excited about him, and not because they think he's going to come in and just be this superstar right away. I don't think that's really fair to expect. I don't think that's what anybody expects from a junior college prospect, but because they think that the potential is there. I wrote a story at thedailymemphian.com about his sort of background and how he grew up in this tiny little town in Georgia, has never really had resources. In junior college was just fighting to get meals, basically, because they don't have a cafeteria or a meal plan there, and living off of one meal a day playing college basketball. And they think as soon as he can finally, get into the Memphis strength program and eat 3 to 5 meals a day, that he's going to bulk up relatively quickly, and that he's going to be an experienced player and a guy that can actually help them on the floor right away. And obviously, they're going to need big men because Precious Achiuwa will be gone to the NBA draft, and you lose Isaiah Maurice as well. So I think that he'll be a useful pickup, although I know he's not flashy and not the star. What do you think you can expect from him, Jonah?
I mean, it's so difficult to gauge what you can get from a junior college prospect. Because of the level of competition he plays at is different, and it's unclear how that will translate to Memphis. It definitely seems like he is a really good shot blocker. He averaged, 5 during his time in junior college
5
this
blocks
season.
a game,
so,
yeah.
And that's really, really good. So he obviously excels at that. Now, I will be interested to see how he fits into the rotation once things start to get going. My big question with this, and I'm sure you've gotten this, is how does this affect Greg Brown? Does this affect Greg Brown's decision? I know they could probably, scholarship-wise, they're probably not worried about it. If you can take Greg Brown and this guy, you make it work. It's probably not going to be an issue. They have it open, blah, 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 blah. But does this affect, or is this a signal to you, hey, we're taking him because we don't know about Greg?
I would say more of the latter. We can get into the scholarships because I think there's still a lot of guys to at play here, and still for us to discuss. But in terms of what this means for Greg Brown, I don't think that, because they take him means that they're automatically not getting Greg Brown, or that they're taking him instead of Greg Brown. I don't think that's the case at all. Although I would just say, in terms of Greg Brown's situation, the confidence that was once there that he would eventually play for Memphis, it's not all the way gone. Like, you never want to come out and say this kid's not going to Memphis, because you know how recruiting works. Like, everything could change at the last second, and you never know. He could end up at Memphis. Greg does have a really good relationship with Mike Miller, so I'm sure saying no to Memphis would be hard for them. But I think as of right now, the expectations are not that he'll end up with Memphis, and that he'll probably end up somewhere else, whether that be Auburn or Texas. And so, he's tougher. And so I think you're right. This does give you a little bit of insurance. So at least it guarantees you have a big man in this class. And so, if you don't get him, then maybe you feel a little bit better. But, you still obviously you want to get Greg Brown. This is a guy that could be a top 10 pick in the NBA draft, right? You want to always prioritize him. I don't think that landing Ahmad Rand is going to scare off Greg Brown. I think if Greg Brown were to go somewhere else, then it's going to be because he wants to go somewhere else, and not because, Memphis, I guess, disturbed the peace by taking a junior college transfer that plays the same position.
Yeah. So say they do miss on Greg Brown, and obviously the top priority right now is Jalen Green. That is the end-all, be-all. That's who they want. That's the number one priority and has been for some time. But after him, because we can talk about Jalen until we're blue in the face, but we have before. But what is the plan outside of these two guys left up on the board? There's Jalen Green and there's Greg Brown, and those guys will make decisions relatively soon. What's the plan beyond that? Because do they have one? Obviously they have one. They have to because of the scholarship situation. And if you miss on these two guys or miss on one of them, you're still going to have spots. You're still going to have needs. What's the plan?
Sure. Well, if you miss on Jalen Green, you also got to think about, there's a reason why all these guys are coming back from Memphis, at least in the backcourt too. As of right now, they've had no transfers. And last season, they had, probably the max amount of guards you can have while keeping everybody at least satisfied with their minutes. And that doesn't mean happy, but at least satisfied with the amount of time that they're playing. And so, if you miss on Jalen Green, it's unfortunate. And maybe you try and go get a late grad transfer or junior college transfer and fill an extra guard position. But I just don't think that that's really necessary. You could just bring back the guards that you have right now. But outside of Jalen Green, in terms of recruiting, there are a few names out there still. The two sit-out transfers, and it's my understanding that, Memphis is in a position where they could take 3 or 4 guys, especially even if you don't get Jalen Green, you could take both. Those are Landers Nolly from Virginia Tech and Alex O'Connell from Duke. And so they're both they are heavily involved in the mix there for both of them. Landers Nolly cut his list to 11. Memphis was in there. I think Memphis will be in there all the way late. They're making a really hard push for him, especially Penny Hardaway. And so I think that they're in a decent position for him. And then when you look at, you could take 2 of those guys that could sit out, and it really doesn't hurt you because you're bringing enough back to give yourself a chance. Now, the outlier and the one other thing that's sort of sitting out there in the distance, and I knew we were gonna need to get to this eventually, is Musa Cisse.
Yeah.
And Musa Cisse is a guy that obviously you would hope can reclassify and be a part of this class. And he would be a huge difference maker if you could get him to Memphis. And, everyone has thought that that's a done deal for a while. That does not mean that some of the characters of college basketball are going to push for him as well. I think LSU's pushing for him pretty hard. You had Cal's been recruiting him for a while. So, you would hope that it's Memphis at this point, though, after all that, the development of him moving to Memphis, everyone has sort of assumed since then that it will be Memphis. And if it is, I think the big question for the Tigers is, are they going to waive these SAT and ACT requirements to get into college? Because if you're a guy that wants to reclassify and go to Memphis, then you need to pass that test. And it's going to be hard to get recruits into college if they can't pass that test. And I'm sure that's something that's affecting Ryan Silverfield as well. Guys who want to enroll in the summer and play in the fall, they can't do that right now. So everyone's sort of looking at the state of Tennessee and the lawmakers in charge to figure out what they're going to do. California and Georgia have both waived SAT and ACT. I think Texas, to an extent, has also waived it. So it'll be interesting to follow there because if a guy like Musa Cisse wants to reclassify, that needs to happen.
Yeah. So say they do get Musa Cisse, they get Jalen Green, and they get Greg Brown. I'm guessing that's best case scenario. Would they have the scholarships to take those 2 transfers that you talked about, or one of the 2? What's the scholarship situation looking like? Because I know Jalen Green, he's the number 1 prospect in the nation, or what was it, number 3? He's basically a top 3 prospect. He's incredible. Would getting him cause any roster shuffling? What would it cause? Because I think if you get those 3, you're probably looking at some shuffling around, aren't you?
Yes, you are. So if you want, and I don't think, again, at the moment, I think that 2 is more likely than 3 in that scenario. But yes, some roster adjustments could technically be made in order to free up the space that Memphis needs to take pretty much anyone that they want in this class. If you do get Jalen Green, I do expect you'll see one transfer, maybe two transfers, just because, like I said, you can, with the amount of guards you had last year, you can keep people satisfied. But you add in a guy who's going to dominate the minutes and dominate the ball, and suddenly people are getting pushed out of the back end of that backcourt a little bit too far, I think. And so I think that you would see some adjustments with the roster at that point. That's something that Penny has talked about. Not specifically, but you heard him hedge when he said, yes, I think everyone's coming back, at the moment, unless things change, I think was the way that he put it. And obviously landing a guy like Jalen Green would change some things. So I think you would probably see a transfer or two in that situation. So you probably clear one or two scholarship spots in that scenario. And then right now you got two open spots after the Rand commitment. So, and I know this was something that was discussed last year, and it's something that, if you don't want to do, but if Jaden Hardaway's scholarship, he's a 4.0 student, he could go on academic scholarship. I think in an emergency scenario, maybe they might be able to use to shuffle that to, an academic scholarship and then take another student on athletic scholarship. So there's a number of different ways to go there, but I don't think scholarships are really a worry for them. Even if you end up picking up 4 guys, you could probably even get to 5 scholarships if you do land Jalen Green. And so we'll see. That's going to be a big development to see how many open up. And I don't think there's any pressure to fill all 13 either. Some of the best schools in the country don't fill all 13. It's simply because it's hard to play that many guys and keep them all happy.
Now we'll pause for a message from our sponsor.
The Daily Memphian Tigers podcast is brought to you by FedEx. Possibilities. What we deliver by delivering.
Okay. So, Drew, right now it is the beginning of April. Guys have decisions coming in the next 2 and 3 weeks. What's the Drew Hill prediction? What's it looking like? Who do you think Memphis gets? Who do you think they don't get? What do you think this looks like this time next month?
Wow. See, I know you and I both don't like giving specific projections because it makes it, there's so much opportunity to be wrong more so than to be right because it's so difficult.
I'm putting the pressure on. This is the podcast.
No,
I do. You got to come with something.
I do think that Jalen Green is going to commit to Memphis. Just from everything that I've heard, the Memphis staff just seems so confident. And that has been a done deal for a while that, that he'll end up at Memphis. And so I feel good about that. I think that you end up getting Jalen Green. I think depending on this ACT-SAT situation, you could get Musa Cisse. And so then you have a class of Musa Cisse and Jalen Green. Even if somebody transfers out, you're happy right there at that point. Just to take those 2 guys, that'll work along with Rand. But I do think that they'll end up getting probably one of the 2 sit-out transfers, not both. So either Alex O'Connell or Landers Nolly. If it were me, if I got to pick between the 2 of them, I think I like the upside of Nolly a little bit more, although he is not as experienced. So that would be the ideal class for me. You get Jalen Green. Maybe you have a guy transfer out of the backcourt. And I don't think that would be Lester at that point. And I think Boogie playing 30 minutes per game could still play a lot of good minutes. So maybe it's somebody else outside of those guys. So I think you get Jalen Green. Depending on this ACT-SAT situation, you could get Musa Cisse, and then you pick up a sit-out transfer to go with Ahmad Rand. I think that's a really good class. That's the best case scenario. Yeah, you'd be really happy to end up with something like that. And so that would set up for a good season, and hopefully there is a season. This is the other thing I wanted to point out that I forgot to point out when we talked about Jalen Green, which is like, if we don't know the certainty of college basketball going into July, and we do know the certainty of sort of foreign leagues, there's not going to be much to stop college basketball players, period, from just saying, all right, I'm going to go take this certain option and pick up, and I'm not going to play college basketball. So it's also important for Memphis and other schools that the NCAA stays on top of this and has a plan, because we all know that Jalen Green, that overseas, is still an option. And so, or even G League is still an option. And so if the plan changes for those, I guess, leagues or organizations, and college basketball takes too long and they're uncertain, that's really going to hurt a lot of different schools and a lot of different people. And so I think in the Jalen Green race, it's the NCAA needs to help Memphis out, which I don't think a lot of people will be very confident about.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about this, how the coronavirus impacts college basketball specifically. I know people have talked about length about college football and how there could be no football next year. We really don't know. We really don't know how this is going to impact the season. Really, only time will tell how we get through the next 2 months, how a second wave and third wave impacts places around the United States. I think that, honestly, sitting here right now, I doubt the season starts on time, but we'll need time, and I think that's probably the case for college basketball. I know people over at Memphis and the AAC are preparing for either a truncated season or no season at all. I think those conversations have been happening for about a week and a half now about how to deal with that. What do you think the case is with college basketball? Where are we right now? Because nobody really talks about it. We know we've skipped the NCAA tournament. We didn't get that. We didn't get the NIT. We got really nothing to end the season, and nobody's really looking ahead and saying, can this happen? Because, I mean, it'll affect a lot of kids. I think a lot of kids could start going to the G League if that is happening, or foreign leagues if those are happening. I mean, one of the main leagues overseas is the Chinese league, and nobody knows what will happen with that. But the NABL has been taking guys. So what is the status of this? What have you heard? What do you think?
In terms of the status, I don't think right now that there's much of an update, but we all know the college basketball season starts in November, so it runs simultaneously to college football for a little bit of time, and then it starts to become its own thing over the winter. But you also wonder if there's a possibility, and I don't know how much it would help or not, because we don't have the numbers yet for this period of time. But if you just back the season up to just start it in either December or in January, and run it either in a condensed way or run it longer into the spring, and just do it that way. I've also seen the idea, and I don't know how realistic this is, of just running college basketball and college football simultaneously in the spring. That seems like a challenge logistics-wise in terms of staff at the universities who help put on these events, as well as television and everything else. But if it can save both sports and make sure that they both happen, I think that's something you got to take into consideration, right?
Yeah.
But overall, I think the hope is that you have a season and that it can start on time, even if it means no fans at the beginning. And I think that, that in the November, that could be a serious possibility to still have no fans.
Yeah. And I don't think that people realize the impact financially, even that no fans will have on the University of Memphis. I mean, I think it's going to be really, really tough going for the athletic department for probably a while going forward because of this, everything that's happened, because with a lot of those season ticket buys come donations. And if you're not getting those season ticket money, you're not getting the donations. I think we could see a pretty rough going forward, like a pretty rough future ahead for Memphis and college athletics. I think this is hurting a lot of industries, especially college sports. I'm interested to see how Memphis deals with it. You've got ongoing projects on campus. You've got very highly paid coaches. You've got all these things going up, and you seem to have a lot of momentum in this hits, and this could be very damaging. What do you think? Nobody really has talked about it a lot, but I think college athletics are in a very precarious position right now because if there is no football, especially, I think that's going to be just awful for a lot of universities, especially Memphis.
Oh, no, I think you're definitely right. And you say especially Memphis. I think you noted one thing that's super important to Memphis, which is those donations. Because, and I had actually talked to somebody in the Memphis athletic department about this. As the economy goes down, this is just not even directly related to ticket sales and whatnot. As the economy goes down, those donors aren't as generous with their money to the school. And Memphis, more so than other schools that get huge payouts from the conference, really relies on those donations. And so in times of economic struggle, it becomes even more difficult on a school like Memphis than, a large state school with a huge payout like an SEC school or a Big Ten school or anything like that. So this really, really hurts Memphis. And I think that's unfortunate, especially for schools like that. And so I know that within the athletic department, the push to keep those donations at the same level so that they can continue sort of the momentum that they've had going forward is going to be something that they're going to have to highlight, because this is going to be a tough time moving forward for sure. And I think you aren't going to see the donations that you saw. And it's not because people aren't as generous, but just because the times are, getting tougher and tougher. So that's a bit disappointing if you're on the Memphis side. So did you have anything else that you thought we needed to touch on?
No, I think we're good. I think we've covered everything. I mean, it's slow outside of basketball recruiting.
Yeah, make sure you're reading the Daily Memphian for all of the updates on coronavirus, as well as some sports coverage. I know we've both been doing Tigers, but we've been doing some other stuff as well off to the side. I think you can expect to see more of that, as we go forward. And just a reporter's a reporter, right, Jonah? You don't just have to do sports. You can do whatever. So
yeah, we've been doing it.
We will be. Yeah, so we'll be working hard on that, and you can get this podcast or any other podcast from the Daily Memphian on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher. You can follow me and Jonah on Twitter. My handle is @DrewHill_DM. His is @_Jonah Jordan. Thanks for listening.
We deliver tickets, team merchandise, and everything you need for the game. But what you really get is so much more.
FedEx Delivery.
Game day spirit. What we deliver by delivering.
In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.